I've seen businesses go from profitable to nearly bankrupt in a matter of weeks because they were spending based on projected LTV that actually was not materializing. If you're serious about scaling, you need to move beyond simple ROAS targets to cohort-based forecasting. And this means projecting out the lifetime value of customer cohorts and working backward to determine how much you can spend on acquisition. Today, I'm diving into one of the most crucial questions every e-com business owner faces, but one that most people get completely wrong. If you've ever worked with an agency or tried to figure out your advertising strategy, you've probably been asked, what's your ROAS target? What's your goal before we start spending money here? And if you're like most business owners, you probably responded with, well, what should it be? What's a good ROAS? A common question that I've even been asked back. Here's the thing. That's exactly the wrong way to think about this question, honestly. And today I'm going to show you the right way to determine your targets, because getting this wrong can literally kill your business. I mean, while getting it right can unlock massive, profitable growth. So let me start by explaining why this question is so critical. For most e-commerce businesses, paid ads represents a massive portion of your total costs, not just like your strategy, but actually your total costs. There's three cost centers: your cost of delivery, your paid ads, your ad spend, and your fixed expenses. All of this affects profitability, obviously, at the end of the day. So when you break down your P&L, you essentially have four main categories. Cost of delivery. This includes your COGS, your cost of goods sold, merchant fees, shipping and fulfillment, duties, taxes, fees, and we actually include returns into our cost of delivery, which is probably different for most people. The reason why we add returns back in is because we don't want it affecting our day-to-day decisions in the ad account. So therefore, I highly recommend that you add returns into your cost of delivery. Now, for most of your businesses, this would actually be such a low percentage, maybe 1% to 2% tops. For an apparel business, this can be really, really impactful. Something like that, where you're buying something, it's not the right fit, and you return it. Anyways, this makes up your cost of delivery. So any variable costs, essentially, to getting your products to the customer's door. Then you have your fixed expenses, right? So everything on the SG&A side, things that are like payroll, salaries, software, rent, and other overhead. Then you also have your ad spend. And this is where you are looking by channel across Facebook, Google, Amazon, TikTok, Pinterest, Microsoft, et cetera, other expenses, your ad spend and marketing costs. And what's left over for most e-commerce brands, especially in the early stages, customer acquisition costs can represent 20 to 40% or even more of your total expenses. So this means if you get your ROAS targeting wrong and overspend, it literally directly eats into your profit, because everything after those three cost centers is your profit at the end of the day. But if you're also too conservative and underspend, you're not generating enough revenue to make up the difference to cover your fixed costs efficiently. So this is why so many e-com businesses fail. They either spend too much and too aggressively and burn through cash, or they're too conservative and never reach that scale needed to be profitable. So there's kind of method one here, right? Which is first order profitability. When I first started in e-com, I thought about ROAS targets in one simple way. And honestly, it's still a great place to start, especially if you're newer to the game. The basic concept is, can you acquire customers profitably on their first purchase? Very simply. So simple example, $100 AOV. Your cost breakdown: COGS, $25. Shipping and fulfillment, $20. Merchant fees and processing, $5. Total cost of delivery, $50. This leaves you with $50 in contribution margin before advertising costs. Now, contribution margin is inclusive of customer acquisition costs, so your advertising costs to acquire that customer. But if you're going to acquire that customer for $25 in ad spend, you're operating at a 4-to-1 ROAS, and you have $25 left over in first order contribution margin profitability. So if you can sell enough products so that those $25 contribution margins adds up to cover your monthly operating expenses, you have a profitable business. So let's say your business costs $2,500 per month to run. In an AI world, that actually probably will be increasingly slow. So you need to sell 100 products per month at that $25 contribution margin to break even. And anything beyond that is pure profit. The beauty of this approach is that it's safe, right? Every customer that tells a friend about your business comes free of charge. There's no acquisition cost for that referral, right? So it's just the COGS of getting that product to that customer's door. Every time an existing customer buys again, that's pure contribution margin minus your COGS. So this method works incredibly well if you're new to e-commerce, still learning the financial side, and you don't want to raise external capital, and you prefer a lower stress approach to business growth, right? Like you don't want to worry about like the LTV cohorts, all that stuff. So your goal is building a solid, profitable business rather than going for massive scale. Method 2, the LTV-based targeting, right? So things here start to get way more sophisticated where the real money is made, really. Because the first order profitability method leaves money on the table if your customers have strong lifetime value. I've worked with one client where every dollar a customer spends on their first purchase, they spend an additional 80 cents over the following year. So that's an 80% increase in customer value over 12 months. So think about that, what this means for our earlier example. If I acquire a customer for $50, break even on first purchase, right, with a $100 AOV, but they spend another $80 over the year, that's $40 in additional contribution margin, assuming 50% margins, right? With zero additional acquisition costs. So this, in theory, changes everything. I could theoretically spend up to $90 to $100 to acquire that customer and still be profitable over the year. So I'm leaving massive growth opportunities on the table if I just stick to first order profitability. And so the key metrics you need to track is obviously the LTV by acquisition channel, the repeat purchase rates by cohort, the amount of time that it gets for that person to come back and get their second purchase, and then contribution margin on repeat purchasers. So to break this out and show you, this is an example of what you would track on Shopify, customer cohort behavior of people that have bought February 2024, how many repeated, how many orders came in within that same month, how many orders came in month 1, 2, and so forth, to see your overall repeat rate within that cohort of customers, that those new customers that came in February 2024, for example. And then breaking out your cost of delivery by new and repeat customers. So what I was showing overall on cost of delivery, but you'd want to split new customer cost of delivery versus returning customer cost of delivery because those have different expectations. Sometimes returning customers have higher discounts to give them more, motivation for new customers to come back and buy again. So that would affect your overall gross margin on repeat customers. So tools like not Lifetimely, but honestly, what we use is Shopify's built-in analytics. Can help you calculate these numbers. And once you have this data, you can build much more aggressive and profitable acquisition strategies. So if you're serious about scaling, you need to move beyond simple ROAS targets to cohort-based forecasting. And this means projecting out the lifetime value of customer cohorts and working backward to determine how much you can spend on acquisition. And that's what goes into an LTV forecast, both new and returning customer revenue. How for acquisition cost modeling, it's how performance changes as you scale spend, cost of delivery projections, including economies of scale as you grow, operating expense budgets, keeping these as a percentage of revenue that's very lean, at least 10 to 15% tops. The goal is to forecast your entire P&L based on customer cohorts and their projected lifetime value. And this gives you incredible clarity on exactly how much you can spend on acquisition while hitting your profit targets. Because if we know and are confident, repeat revenue is the most predictable part of your business. If we know that these cohorts are strong, if you've been in the game at least even a year, up 2 years or more, then your repeat is very predictable. So to go back to that example, if we know that 80% is going to come back of that first time order is going to come back and spend on the $100, they're going to spend another $80 so that your LTV is 180. You can get aggressive on, and you can keep your AMER target, your new customer ROAS target, as low as possible, which will behoove you because you can spend more money, acquire more customers, and it shakes out to higher top line and bottom line profit. Here's something most people miss entirely. Your ROAS target should vary dramatically based on your business goals. Let me say that again. Your ROAS target should vary dramatically based on your business goals. There is not a wrong or right here. They're just based on, hey, the business model, how it's set up to scale. So do I need to be first order profitability because my business is basically a one-time purchase? I think back in my days at Kalo, they constantly had to be releasing new SKUs, new colors, all these different things because their LTV was very poor. It was a silicone wedding ring. You're not buying loads of amounts of these, but how do you get people to come back, new colors, etc.? That's kind of the curse of a one-time purchase like that. That's how you create LTV. But if you're a consumable, if you're like our client, Purdy and Fig, who has a very high repeat business, or, you're on a supplement business, then knowing your business model is crucial, and how you go into the ad auction dynamics, etc., into that. But it also should vary on goals. Like, I could have two identical businesses, same unit economics, same LTV, same market opportunity, and run them with completely different ROAS targets based on what you, the owner, are trying to achieve, right? So if you want to work 20 hours a week and you want a very profitable, predictable business, and you're not looking to get acquired ever, anytime, you want this to be a family business that you pass on to your future kids, that's a very different target and goal compared to someone who's raising money, raising capital, wants to get acquired within 1 to 2 years. So from a stable growth, if you want to build a $5, $10, $20 million business without external funding and minimal stress, you should probably stick closer to first order profitability. It's less risky. Cash flow is more predictable, and you can build a very solid business. If you're trying to build a 9-figure, $100 million plus business quickly, you almost certainly need to get aggressive with LTV-based acquisition, and you'll need to be comfortable with higher risk because you're ultimately betting on these cohorts to shake out. It's better cash flow management, demand planning, and much more sophisticated tracking. And the mistake that I see constantly is people with modest goals using aggressive strategies and burning out or going broke, or people with big goals using conservative strategies and they're missing their market opportunity. So you need to be brutally honest about your financial skill level and comfort with complexity, your access to capital for cash flow management, your actual growth goals versus what sounds impressive, and ultimately your risk tolerance, right? If you're going to use LTV-based targeting, you absolutely must have systems in place to track whether customers are actually delivering the lifetime value you're projecting. This naturally demands cohort repeat purchase rates versus projections. How AOV values are coming in on repeat purchasers, the customer churn rates, constantly weekly, monthly checking actuals versus projected and forecasted. And the moment you see customers not performing to your LTV projections, you need to immediately adjust your acquisition spending. Because I've seen businesses go from profitable to nearly bankrupt in a matter of weeks because they were spending based on projected LTV that actually was not materializing. However, I still say repeat revenue is very predictable, especially for businesses that are watching this, that you've been around for at least 2 years. Unless you're changing really drastic things, or you've really gotten bloated on fixed expenses, like some of those things, that's why you need to have a full P&L projection and forecast. So how do you actually implement this? Like, here's my step-by-step recommendation. You need to know your unit economics. You need to calculate your true cost of delivery. So be thorough. Number 2, you need to determine your monthly operating expenses. And then you need to set ROAS targets based on those 2 goals, whether it be first order profitability or LTV targeting. And then you want to scale to the point where at minimum contribution margin is covering your OPEX. Obviously, the more that grows, the more profitable that you are, because profit is simply contribution margin minus your OPEX. Now, phase 2, you start modeling and implementing a proper 90 plus 6 month and on LTV tracking, analyzing repeat purchase patterns. So a lot of what I was screen sharing here with your cohort-based projections. And I would start, especially, this is what most people don't understand, is when you are competing in a category that is a consumable, your competitors should be, most of them, are probably willing to acquire a customer at as lowest target as possible, without going too much in the negative on first order. So when you enter an ad auction and now you want to be first order profitability, there's going to be no more customers for you to scoop up. And then all this ties into a comprehensive LTV-based forecast with weekly tracking. You're increasing your regression based on validated LTV data, how it's coming in. You're scaling advertising spend based on how that's coming in. So now here's, I would say, the biggest mistakes that I see when it comes to like ROAS setting and targets, outside of what I've already mentioned, is number 1, copying someone else's ROAS target. This is terrible. What works for another business won't work for yours. It's just simply like there never are the variables exactly equal. Category is different. How they're running the ad account is different. The creative is different. The products are different. Even if it's exactly the same category, the fixed expenses are probably very different. So what works for another business is not working or will not work for you. And then ignoring cash flow implications. So LTV-based strategies require more working capital naturally. You just have to have upfront capital. You have to be able to fund your growth, and the cohorts need to shake out. And then ultimately, if you have paired this with poor LTV tracking, if you can't measure it accurately, you can't bet the business on it. And then what I've already kind of brought up, misaligned goals and strategies, conservative or aggressive goals with conservative or aggressive tactics or vice versa. And then not accounting for taxes, to be honest. Sometimes losing money on acquisition is better than paying higher tax rates on profit. And so, again, remember, there is no universal good ROAS target. Your target depends on your unit economics, cost structure, and then ultimately your LTV and repeat purchase behavior. And it all ties into you, the business owner, your goal, your growth timeline, your skill level, your risk tolerance, your access to capital and cash flow situation. The more clarity you can get around all of this, the better you can determine your optimal target, and the more you can reduce anxiety about whether your ad spend is working. So my suggestion is, based on all of this, work backwards from first order profitability, get your cohort-based LTV targeting in place, and then pair that with your goal. And together with all those things, you can make sure your strategy is aligned with those capabilities. So that's a wrap on today's deep dive into ROAS targeting. If this was helpful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tactical e-commerce content like this. And then ultimately, what questions do you have about setting your ROAS targets? Drop them in the comments below. I read every single one and often turn the best questions into future videos. And if you're running an e-commerce business and want to dive deeper into the financial side of scaling, I will personally help you free of costs on a consulting call if you want to reach out. I'll see you in the next video.